So that brings us, it segues nicely into the current section, the nature of the world. So what he's talking about here is exactly what we were discussing, that we need to understand the nature of the world if we're going to be able to relate to it in a way that doesn't make us agitated, doesn't get us affected. We can't relate to something unless we know what it is. So the example that he often uses, you have a kitten and a cobra. You know exactly the nature of the cobra and the kitten. That being the case, you know exactly what to do with the cobra, exactly what to do with the kitten. It never happens that you see the beauty of the cobra and you're so enamored by it that you go and pick it up. Cobra's an amazing looking creature. But it never happens that you want to go and pick it up and play with it. Kitten, come here. That you know exactly how to relate to them because you understand their natures. This is what he's saying about the world. Understand the nature of the world, then you'll be able to relate to it in a way which is in your best interests. So he says, the world is ever in a flux of change. The year passes through spring, summer, autumn, winter, the day through morning, noon, evening, night. Energy through mechanical, electrical, sonic, magnetic. The physical body changes through childhood, youth, adulthood, old age. So do the mind and intellect change. Nothing in the world remains static. Change or perish seems to be the law of nature. How can this ever-changing world cater to individual demands? Yet you expect in vain for the world to fit into your mental pattern and your desires remain unfulfilled. Your mind becomes agitated. You blame the world for your discontentment. You must understand the world is an admixture of pleasure and pain. Observe the play of pleasure and pain to become an introvert. Use these contrasting experiences to delve deep into your inner personality. Search within and discover the seat of true peace and happiness. Alright, so fundamentally then he's saying that the nature of the world is to change. Nothing in the world stays static. The problem is that we have a fixed mental pattern. You know, our way of viewing the world is fixed. Another way we can talk about this is with regards to attachment. So you get into a relationship. It's a child or it's a spouse or whoever it is. And there is something about that person that you love. And what happens is that we develop an expectation and attachment for that person to be that thing, to remain as that thing. And when he or she changes, it violates the mind's demands. And so we get frustrated. And what do? Finger of blame gets pointed at that person. Now they may change for the worse, they may change for the better. The problem is not their change, the problem is our relationship with them, which is I want you to be static. I want you to fit into my expectations. And this is why I've heard him say often, and we were talking about it before, there is nothing in the world per se that can agitate you if you don't let it. So that when we say that we have let it agitate us, what it means is that we have permitted our mind to generate expectations and personal demands. That's the root cause of our agitation. He says your desires remain unfulfilled, your mind becomes agitated. So this then becomes the definition of suffering. The definition of suffering is the mental agitations that arise because of unfulfilled desires. If I'm suffering, it's because I have a desire that is being obstructed, unfulfilled. Now, it could be a legitimate desire. We're not saying that there's anything wrong with maybe the nature of the desire. I have a desire for food in my belly. I've desired for a house over my head. These are legitimate desires, of course. But the reason that we're going through this understanding is because we have a wrong tendency when it comes to relating with the world. What we do is blame the world for our suffering. If we understand that the world is always going to change. And so one of the ways that he talks about the world is this idea of pairs of opposites. There's always going to be pleasure and pain, comfort, discomfort, health, ill health, joy, sorrow, success, failure, profit, loss, birth, death, war, peace. None of these things can be avoided. That's what makes up the world. It's like, I like heads, I don't like tails. Where there is a head, there is a tail. We can't experience joy without understanding the subjective experience of suffering. We don't know up in the absence of down. We don't know loneliness unless we know connection. So understanding there's always going to be this shifting of opposites. And so when one comes, you welcome it. And when it leaves, you say goodbye. And when the next one comes, you welcome it. And when it leaves, you say goodbye. The problem is we welcome it and try to cling on to it. And when it leaves, and it will, we go with it, or we try to go with it. And so that's why we suffer. Observe the play of pleasure and pain to become introvert. So what he's talking about here is this idea that, we're talking about this idea that the tendency is to blame the external world because the mind is extroverted. So this word introvert, extrovert, they have different connotations and different definitions depending upon what you're reading or what you're listening to. So in the context here, introvert, extrovert basically and simply refers to the direction of your attention. So if the direction of your attention is out into the external world, extrovert. If the direction of your attention is within, introvert. So the moment that we experience suffering, an extroverted mind goes, that's causing me suffering. And it's present in all of us. You'll see it on a daily basis. I'm sure you've seen these videos of people in workplaces beating the hell out of their computers. They pick up the keyboard and smash it and then throw the whole thing in. They've become angry at an inanimate object and they're punishing the inanimate object for their frustration. It's the extroverted behavior. What he says is that make good use of the admixture of pleasure and pain to turn introvert. So what he's talking about here, so for example, when there is suffering, we are hopefully alert enough to ask the question, what am I experiencing? Fear, anger, jealousy, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, right? Name it. Give it a label. You don't have to go too deeply into it. Don't get into a big story about it, but just generally understand what it is you're experiencing. And then ask, well, why? Why am I suffering? This is turning introvert. Because you're not saying there's a problem, you're asking questions of yourself. What am I experiencing? And so the attention now has to go within. And again, answer these questions genuinely, honestly. What are you experiencing? Jealousy. Why? Right. So then you start to look at the external trigger. My partner's talking to that guy over there. Right. That's the trigger. Why are you feeling jealous? Well, because, etc. Then you answer these questions. So you start to gain an understanding of what's going on inside your own personality. It's only when we understand what's going on inside that we can start to deal with it. So you've got to learn about your own self first. And this is what he's talking about here, this constant churning of pleasure, pain, etc. Use that to turn introvert. It's like the example I've heard him use. If you want to sharpen a knife, you need friction. You get a grinding stone, start that wheel moving, and then put the blade on it. So that friction that we experience in life, use that as the whetstone for sharpening your introverted focus. What am I going through? Where's it coming from? How do I deal with it? Start to question your own self. So turning introvert, this is basically what it means. What am I going to do about it? What can I do about it? What are my options? The other way of relating to the world is to be reactive. The emotion goes out and we follow it. The world is sometimes cruel only to be kind. Realize that. Do not abuse the plan of nature. Do not fall a prey to cynicism or pessimism in life. Instead, look at the world constructively. Does not a sportsman improve his game with strong opposition? Does not trade flourish with stiff competition? Does not a government stabilize with healthy collision? Thus make good use of the apparent antagonism of nature to rise to greater heights of perfection. So this is an interesting idea. He says the apparent antagonism of nature. So it does seem that nature antagonizes us. The world continually throws stuff at us that causes us to feel burdened. He says the world is sometimes cruel only to be kind. To realize that. So what is this kindness? What is this plan of nature? So fundamentally, again, what we're saying is if we feel antagonized, it's not the world's responsibility. But what we can do is use the apparent antagonism of circumstances to rise to greater heights. So it's like he uses the example here of sportsmen. If we want to improve our game, the only way to improve our game is to play against someone who can beat us. If we constantly play against people that we can always beat, we'll never improve. We have to play against people who have a higher degree of skill and proficiency in that game. Get beaten. Keep getting beaten. Keep getting beaten. Keep getting beaten. You will improve. The problem is that we have a result orientation. Right, so you imagine you're a tennis player. And the result, of course, that you want is to win, and you always function towards that result. But if every time you lose you get disheartened, you're going to be a miserable tennis player. If every time you lose you recognize that was a really hard match, what that means is you've had to stretch yourself just to stay in the game. Okay, I lost, but it stretched every one of my capabilities, every one of my skills got to work out. Then you have a completely different perspective. You've taken to the result not as a dependency. It's the thing that you're striving towards, but you're not dependent upon the result. So what's the difference? Okay, you take one tennis player who gets beaten and they're dejected, another tennis player who gets beaten and they've said, wow, what a test of my skills. What marks the difference? What's present in one that's absent in the other? So the guy who's dejected has result orientation. He's dependent upon getting that result. The one who is not dejected, who is in fact enthusiastic about being beaten, it's because he has an ideal that exists outside the game, outside the result. He has a goal that is more long-lasting and that is more important and that is not dependent upon any particular match result. Just be the best tennis player you can be. Well, how will you achieve that? By working against opposition that stretches me. Now, when he's got that goal of continuously improving himself as a tennis player, then when he gets beaten, he goes, beaten again. But his goal of improving is being advanced. This is why it's so important to have the goal of self-development in life. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't matter what the outcome of any experience or situation is, if you have that as a goal and you can learn something from it, then your goal of self-development is being advanced. Mm-hmm. And you recognize that the self-development goal is more important than the success in any business endeavor, the success in any relationship, the success in any other pursuit that I'm engaged in. That my self-development goal lies beyond those. It exists outside them. It's not dependent upon them. So the moment we set that as an ideal in life, everything that we encounter can be used towards that end. In the exact same way that being the best tennis player I can be means that when I lose, I take it in my stride, because there's something else, something outside this that I'm striving towards. So he says, then you won't fall a prey to cynicism. there's a constructive view on life. Okay, how can I use this for my self-development? And you can always use it for your self-development. Exactly what we were talking about before. If I'm frustrated, why am I frustrated? My own ego, my own attachment, my own expectations. Fantastic. Use this as an opportunity to highlight what my expectations and attachments are, reflect upon them, understand their relative valuelessness, and then re-establish my ideal. Think about and visualize what it means to be more mature than that, to be better than that. All right, I failed this time. What would I do next time? If I could relive this moment again, what would it look like if I related to it from a more mature perspective? Practice it. No, I wouldn't do that. All right, practice it again. Yeah, that's much better. Have a third go. Practice it again. And when you get it, yeah, that's exactly the person I want to be. That's how I want to relate to it. That's what I want to do. Then repeat it. And repeat it again. Get that vision of yourself being more mature. Get it cemented inside you. The more you, and think about this from the negative side, the more you think about doing something, say, selfish or self-centered, indulging in a sense contact or breaking some moral code, your own moral code or whatever it is, the more you think about it, the more likely you are to do it. If you constantly think about the illicit affair, if you constantly think about going towards the thing that you should not go towards, you are much more likely to act it out. And so now use that tendency in the positive way. Visualize yourself being the person that you want to be 6 months down the track, 6 years down the track, 30 years down the track. Visualize it. That becomes your ideal. Always have something beyond it, but that becomes an understanding. So you're using the apparent antagonism of nature as a means of turning introvert, finding out who you are, and then deciding where you want to go.